Thank you for listening. I trust you will only share this recording with your management team. The following is my sales keynote titled, Unique Sales Techniques That Work. I look forward to presenting it to your sales team. Listening time will be about 42 minutes. While preparing for this presentation, I came across an old Toronto Star personal advice column. It reads, Dear Ellie, I'm single and the person I'm seeing is married. I'm given a Tesla Model X to drive, a 1,400 square foot luxury condo to live in, and an allowance of $15,000 per month to spend. Ellie, I'm confused. Am I doing right or wrong? Signed, Perplexed in Toronto. Ellie answered, Dear Perplexed, I don't know if you're doing right or wrong, but you sure are not doing bad. As a salesperson, I do not know if you consider yourself to be in the top 10% when compared to other salespeople in your industry. You are, however, in sales. Therefore, you're not doing bad. Imagine for a moment that you work in construction outdoors, and it's the coldest day of winter or the hottest day of summer. So bottom line, you're not doing bad being in sales. The title of this presentation is Unique Sales Techniques That Work. Rapport is the beginning of developing trust. So let's get started with an unusual and magical method on how to start developing incredible, immediate rapport when meeting someone for the first time. I call this technique the 2 chocolate bar approach. I've used it countless times in my career. I would be sure to show up for my appointment 15 minutes early. I would introduce myself to the receptionist. Let's say the receptionist's name is Ken, and let's say I have a meeting with a new contact called Nancy Young. I would say to Ken, Ken, I'm here to see Nancy Young, but before you announce that I'm here, I have 2 questions. The first question is the most important. I would then pause momentarily. I would then pull out from my briefcase a Lindor milk chocolate bar and a Lindor dark chocolate bar and say, do you prefer milk chocolate or dark chocolate? 99% of the time, the receptionist would take one. I would then give the chocolate bar to Ken and I would say to him, the next question is a little different. What is it that you like or admire about Nancy? 100% of the time, I was able to draw out at least 2 compliments. That would usually include such ideas as the person is always organized and treats everyone with respect. I would then ask Ken for his permission to tell Nancy what he had said. I would then wait in the lobby for Nancy to come out. When meeting Nancy, I would say to her, loud enough for Ken to hear, do you know what Ken just told me about you? I would then pause and wait for a reaction from Nancy. I would then proceed to pass on the compliments from Ken to Nancy. Mission complete. Incredible immediate rapport with Nancy has just been started. I've never heard this technique taught. Positive first impressions are vital. Surveys have shown that customers must buy the salesperson first before they buy the products. Remember, people buy from people. Opening with compliments when starting a conversation with the prospect was always a great start to the sales call. I want my new prospect to be thinking, this salesman is different in a good way. He's serious about selling. I'm going to ask you to develop a radical imagination. In my lifetime, I've listened to several hundred hours of sales training material and read countless books. I'm going to share with you some killer, unique techniques. What you will need to do is translate these ideas into your situations. In 1984, I took a job selling on a 100% commission basis and failed miserably for 3 years. Oh, I did sell. For years I sold and sold. Pizza, that is. I delivered a lot of pizza every night for a few years as I had to supplement my income to feed my wife and 3 boys. I even moved in with my mother-in-law for a period. I struggled and I struggled, but I wasn't going to give up. During the struggle, I attended Zig Ziglar's sales training seminar and bought his 12 sales tapes. I borrowed countless sales training recordings from many Toronto libraries. I'd say it took me 10,000 hours of 100% commission selling and studying to finally achieve incredible success. If you have not read the book Outliers, The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell, you will find it a very interesting read. In his book, he dedicated an entire chapter to a 10,000 hour rule. In 1987, I started to sell mobile phones. Mobile phones had been out for only a year and a half and were considered to be extremely expensive. I sold for Motorola, which at the time was the brand name for quality. A mobile phone installed in one's car sold for $4,000 in 1987. The 2-pound handheld portable, also known as the Brick, sold for $5,000. The handheld portable and car packaged together sold for $7,300. And that's when a dollar was worth something. In fact, according to the Government of Canada, $1 in 1987 with inflation is now $2.36. Therefore, the cost for a complete mobile phone package was just over $17,000 in 2024 dollars. In 1987, airtime was also extremely expensive. When working for Motorola, I literally saw hundreds of salespeople try to sell phones and then quit. In Toronto, it seemed as though 10 new salespeople, mostly university graduates, were hired every 2 weeks. Within a month or so, 8 or 9 would quit. These quitters got burned out just trying to get prospects on the phone. When they did get in front of suspects, they were unable to make a sale. Personally, I was never going to quit. During my first 16 weeks, I personally made several hundred phone calls. I was able to get in front of a dozen or so CEOs of small businesses. I too was unable to generate even just one sale. Because the mobile phones and the cost of the service were extremely expensive, the CEOs of small businesses that I met with could not afford or cost justify the expense. The sales force did grow to 136 salespeople in Canada. After my very slow start, once my skills were sharpened and new strategies were implemented, my results became phenomenal. Then for 8 quarters in a row, I was either first or second place out of the 136 salespeople. I then left Motorola and opened up my own independent mobile phone business. I'm now going to share with you some unique prospecting techniques from those mobile phone selling days. The best possible prospects for mobile phones were ideally CEOs of medium and large-sized businesses. Now this was before auto attendants and voicemail. These CEOs would have their personal assistants screen all calls from putting salesmen through. The media portrayed mobile phones as being for the rich and the famous. Therefore, when telephone calling, it was very difficult to get past the possible prospect's gatekeeper. To get through, I developed what I call the bullet approach. The results were then virtually 100% successful. I would prepare and drop off an envelope for my target CEO. It would be sealed closed with the person's name and the word personal on the front. Let's say a prospect's name was Mike Schneider. When dropping off the package, I would also find out the name of the CEO's personal assistant. Let's say her name is Rosemary. When Mike opened the envelope, it included a card and some empty bullet cartridges. Yes, bullet cartridges. They would probably fall out when the envelope was open. The front of the card had a humorous cartoon on it. This cartoon had a Roman general with all his soldiers holding their shields and swords. Off to the side in this cartoon was a man with a machine gun on a tripod. A caption had the Roman general saying, "I don't have time to see any salesmen." When Mike opens the card, he would then see on the inside of the card the following handwritten text. Dear Mike, I sell a new business tool that allows you to use your time more effectively and live life more relaxed. I will call soon to set up an appointment to tell you about this wonderful new product. Signed, Christopher the Bullet. The next day, I would call for Mike and virtually always be put through to Mike's personal assistant, Rosemarie. I would then say to Rosemarie, good morning, my name is Christopher the Bullet. Would you please put me through to Ken? Rosemarie insists she needs to know what it's about. I would then say very firmly, Ken is expecting my call. Please just tell him it's the Bullet calling. Rosemarie would then check with Ken to see if it was okay to put the call through. When using this method, the possible prospects almost always took the call. These prospects, when taking my call, sometimes were chuckling or even laughing a little as they recalled the cartoon. I would then say, Mike, thank you for taking my call. You're probably wondering what this new business tool is that allows you to use your time more effectively and live life more relaxed. I would then say, successful people are now using mobile phones, and I think you should have one too. Let's say it was Monday. Even if I had no appointments for the whole week, I would appear to be busy and closed for an appointment. I would say, I have only 2 appointments left this week, Thursday at 10:45 a.m. or Friday at 1:30. Which do you prefer? I then booked the appointment for at least 3 business days away. I wanted this prospect to think about owning a phone when driving over the next few days. Over time, I also learned to qualify the prospects during this initial call. After booking the appointment, I would then ask permission to ask 2 additional questions. They were, is there anybody else other than yourself that would be involved in deciding to get a mobile phone? 100% of the time, there was no one else. I would then also ask if they were then convinced that the Motorola phone was by far the best value in the marketplace. Will you be in a position to make a decision? They always answered yes. In December 1987, I had one of my best sales months. I was on fire. Using these 2 qualifying questions, I closed 54 of 56 sales calls in 1 month. I was able to walk out with a check 54 times. The 2 that did not close lied to me to get me to go and see them. Only a very small percentage of salespeople ever achieve quota. I personally achieved 540% of quota. There are many additional unique sales techniques that I use to achieve success. The building of trust is by far the most important aspect of selling. I will deal with what the one key secret of building trust is at the end of this presentation. Do you think you know what this one secret is? When I finally tell you what I think, some of you will be surprised. At times, my new prospects seemed to be very busy. I would then say, do you still have time, or perhaps we should reschedule this meeting? They had always declined. If your prospect wants to reschedule, then you don't want to meet. Sincerely offering to reschedule the meeting also helped to build rapport even more. The prospect would always say something like, no, let's get on with it. It seems as though they then sat back, relaxed, and gave me their full attention. I would then ask, how are we for time? Once a prospect said, we have a hard stop in 20 minutes. I made sure to complete the sale in 20 minutes that usually took 45 minutes to an hour. The more I sold, the easier it was to sell. Once my new customers had their phones, they were enjoying its usage more than they could ever have imagined. My belief in phone ownership grew and grew with every new customer. I cannot overemphasize the importance of belief in one's product or service. Since selling is a transference of feeling, it was my job to transfer this excitement to each new prospect. If the prospect was the result of a referral, I would always call the referral before each appointment. I would then be able to quote the referral as to how they were enjoying mobile phone ownership. If I had recently sold some business neighbors, I would be sure to mention which neighbors had already bought a mobile phone. My first main goal was to make a new friend, all the while quickly determining what this prospect's buying style was. People who do business with people who seem to love what they do. After initial pleasantries and conversation, I would pull out a blank lease agreement and put it on the desk first. In 1987, 95% of all sales were leased to own. I then pulled out a beautiful leather presentation binder, reminding myself that listening helps to build trust. I also mentally reminded myself that for several reasons, I should always pause before I speak. The question that I then asked very gently was, so, why have you decided to buy a mobile phone? Based on how the prospect answered, I knew immediately how interested the prospect was. A significant percentage were interested. I believe because since booking the appointment while driving, he had had a chance to think about the possibility of owning a mobile phone. If I had to develop interest and turn interest into a need, I would then ask such questions as, have you ever been in a position where you could have used the phone while driving? Or can you imagine turning your driving time into productive time? People buy based on emotion and justify logically. Throughout the sales call, my goal was to make a decision for the prospect to buy a phone and then get their agreement. I would always assume the sale. For example, when talking about the phone and the service, I would always include the fact that they will be enjoying a voice mailbox as part of the service. In 1987, voicemail in businesses were uncommon. This feature alone sometimes closed the deal. Mega credibility was established by the fact that in North America, 90% of the radios used by police, fire, and ambulance were made by Motorola. If a prospect ever pulled out a competitive brochure, I was prepared, as I knew my competition inside and out. I would point out to my prospect the good aspects of the phone's brochure. I would always close the issue by saying that if there was a better valued mobile phone in the marketplace, then that is what I would be selling. At this point, my incredible professionalism, including the compliments that I would have drawn out from the receptionist, take the issue of competitive phones off the table. It was always important to try to close the order on the first call. If I didn't, at times it seems, sometimes the personal assistant had a cousin who was also selling phones. Also, the two qualifying questions when booking the appointment were important. Because of the sizable expense, some people would have preferred to think on it. I had them confirm when I booked the appointment that there was no one else involved in making the decision. In the presentation, I also confirmed that Motor was by far the best value in the marketplace. Throughout the presentation, I was always watching the body language of the prospect. Usually it seemed if the prospect was sitting back and then started to lean forward, they were ready to close. Closes should always be warm. The alternative choice was easy. So, do you want to purchase the phone outright or do you want to lease it? As soon as the prospect said yes by confirming a committing statement to a question, I would reach across the desk and shake hands with my new customer and say, congratulations on taking advantage of the latest technology. The act of interrupting the presentation to shake my customer's hand again said that I was no ordinary salesman. I would then stop selling and write up the order. The key to ongoing success was developing new prospects. The next technique I developed to an art. I called it, I've got a problem. So, after signing the paperwork, we would then be waiting for the accounting department to cut the check for the first month's payment or for the full amount. So, the paperwork was done. I would look at my new customer and say firmly, I have just one problem, and then pause. This new customer would naturally develop a puzzled look on their face. I would then pick up their business card and say, "Your name is going into my happy customer file." The problem is, my prospect file is now one name short. I would then pull out 5 blank cards and lay them across the desk. I would then say, "You no doubt know at least 5 successful people, just like yourself, who could make use of a mobile phone." I then got out my pen with all the expectation in the world for my new customer to give me 5 names, company names, and whatever other information they volunteered. Once I got the 5 names, I would go back to the first card. I would say, "What is it that you like and admire about this person?" I was relentless and persistent about drawing out compliments for each person. I would then get my customer's permission to pass on the compliments to the 5 referrals. I must give credit to Dave Mather from Dale Carnegie Training for teaching me this technique of drawing out compliments. Now, here is a tactic on how I handled my new customers to get even more referrals. In the beginning, 95% of phones were installed in the car. I would always follow up and call my customers once they had the phone for a few days. Several times, my new customers would tell me that they had given my name and number to someone. When I called these referrals, some somehow had already bought a phone. Having missed several possible sales, I then added a new ending to my sales call. I would say to my customer, "I have a favor to ask," and then pause. I would say, "Please do not ever give my name and number to anybody. Promise? Instead, please call me and give me the person's name and number. Okay? Promise?" This request for my new customers to call me worked very well. I always ended the sales call by saying, "Thank you for giving me the honor of serving you." On the way out, I would stop at the receptionist and thank Ken for the assistance as well. So, after every successful sale, I always walked away with 5 referrals. This is what happened when following up with the referrals. For example, if I was calling one of Mike's referrals, let's say his name is John. When I called for John, I would get the switchboard and I would ask for the name of John's personal assistant. Let's say her name is Kathy. I would then ask to be put through to John. I would no doubt get John's personal assistant. I would say, "Good morning, Kathy. My name is Christopher Vanderhoff. Would you please put me through to John?" Kathy no doubt would ask for the purpose of the call. I would say, "I have a personal message from Mike Schneider to give to John. Would you please put me through?" If Kathy then pushes me again for the purpose of the call, I would say firmly that I have a personal message for John from Mike Schneider. Would you please put me through? This technique did not always work, but did work most of the time. When I then spoke with John, I would open the conversation with the compliments from Mike. Again, mission complete. Incredible immediate rapport has been started with John. I sold thousands of mobile phones over the years, in large part to working referrals with compliments. I always called my customers back with the results of the successes from the referrals that I had received. Learning to qualify possible prospects is always very important. At the annual auto show in Toronto, Motorola had a booth at the top of the escalator. Because we had up to 50 salespeople in the Toronto area, I would be scheduled for only a couple 4-hour shifts. Because mobile phones were still new, countless people would stop by to ask a lot of questions. Realizing that only a very small percentage could afford or cost justify a phone, I quickly developed 2 questions to determine right away if I was speaking to an actual prospect. Watching for their unconscious response, the 2 questions I asked: "So how long have you been thinking about getting a mobile phone?" If they were thinking of getting one, the next question was, "If you were to get a phone, how soon would you want to get one?" Through my questioning, I then had a real prospect or only someone who was just curious about the technology. If I had a real prospect, I then set up an appointment to go see them in their office, rather than take up their time at the auto show. If I was speaking to someone who was only curious, I would then give them our information package and politely suggest They enjoy the auto show and read the material at home. Most people were only curious. If you ever work trade shows, be sure to pre-plan your quick qualifying questions. The next sales technique I call Ask Me What I Have in My Pocket. In 1996, Motorola was the first to come out with a groundbreaking flip phone called the StarTAC. It was the first small phone that easily fits in one shirt pocket. Up until then, the latest handheld phones were still fairly large. This flip phone sold for $5,000 in 1996. That's $9,000 in 2024 dollars. With this technique, I prospected everywhere I went. I had a small sign on my lapel. It read, "Ask me what I have in my pocket." Yeah, that's right. Ask me what I have in my pocket. So when I was in line to get a coffee or in an elevator or basically anywhere I went, I would catch people reading the lapel sign. I would then pull out the new, very small phone and ask the person if they were thinking about getting a phone, or do they know of anyone who was thinking of getting a phone. I sold countless phones all because of a stupid lapel sign. I recommend all salespeople permanently wear a lapel sign. Start up conversations everywhere you go. You never know where you can find new leads. I sold thousands of phones. In the beginning, as I mentioned earlier, 95% of the phones were installed in a vehicle. In the beginning, I met every new customer at their install. I would train them on the ease of use of the phone. I would help program some numbers into memory for speed dialing. I would also help them set up the voicemail box. After a while, I was selling too many phones to be able to meet every install. I then needed to get the service staff to help train my customers for me. I always bought coffees and donuts for the installers and service coordinators all year long. I also made sure they were taken care of at Christmas time. I always made sure my customers got the royal treatment. Because the installers always spoke highly of me, my customers knew they were getting the special treatment. The installers always took time to train my new customers and to set up the phone and the voicemail box. As a result, I was able to develop a gigantic referral network. With referrals, I always made sure I drew out compliments that I could pass on. I was therefore always able to make warm calls only. The next tactic I used I call sell them in bunches. I believe I was the only salesperson in the country to use this next sales technique. I figured out a way to sell to groups of people at a time. I would send out a mass mailing to an industrial area, inviting people to a free breakfast and a seminar on mobile phones. I would conduct these seminars once a week throughout the Greater Toronto area. I would then follow up with the attendees and write up their orders. Is there any way you can conduct seminars and sell in bunches? The next technique I call do what no one else can do. One of my favorite sales training recordings of all time is from Zig Ziglar. His 12-hour recording, Secrets of Closing the Sale, is a true classic. Zig explains when he sold life insurance, he talks about using a marriage certificate to close the life insurance sale. He would have a nice marriage certificate prepared ahead of time. If the prospect says there was a distant relative that perhaps they should buy their life insurance from or was hesitating, Zig would then say, "I can do something for you that no one else can do," and then pause. Zig would then pull out a marriage certificate. The fancy certificate was already filled out with his name and the prospect's name, and say, "I can marry you." In brief, the certificate says, Zig Ziglar marries John and Mary Smith. Zig Ziglar agrees to be available at all times for life insurance service need of any kind. Zig Ziglar agrees to remain in constant contact. John and Mary Smith agree to give Zig Ziglar the right to serve. Cancelable for any reason by John and Mary Smith. Non-cancelable for any reason by Zig Ziglar. Zig says that if he ever got a marriage certificate signed, 100% of the time he also got a life insurance application signed as well. Zig insists that he developed the idea from Frank Betcher. Frank wrote a book called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. In this 1947 legendary sales classic, Frank Bettcher said he was seeing a prospect who needed a very large life insurance policy for business reasons. Frank was able to say that he could do something that no other life insurance salesman can do today. Frank had already booked his prospect for a physical for the same day with the only medical examiner whose single examination was good enough for the very large needed life insurance policy. The next technique I call "to it." Zig Ziglar eventually started a large training and coaching corporation that continues today. Once, while selling a large training contract, he was having difficulty closing the sale immediately. He was speaking with a committee of 4 people. All 4 agreed that the proposed program was what they needed. They agreed that the program was well worthwhile and the price was fair. The prospects admitted that one day they did need to implement the program. Zig then had the prospects confirm that one day they would get around to it, emphasizing the words around to it. The 4 prospects agreed. Well, Zig pulled out a round business card with his name and address on one side, and on the other side it had a word that spells the 4 letters TUIT, which sounds to it. He then said, now that you have a round to it, let's go ahead and put your okay on this agreement. Zig said the prospects laughed. Zig insists that he then closed the sale all because of a stupid round business card. The next techniques come from Joe Girard. Joe is known as the greatest car salesman ever. He was a car salesman from 1963 to 1978. During these 15 years, he sold over 13,000 cars. That's individual sales, not fleet sales. Joe is recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records. He held the top record for the last 12 of those 15 years. Overall, he averaged 900 cars per year. And during the last 6 years, he sold an average of 1,300 cars per year. He also holds the record for the most cars sold in 1 year. In 1973, he sold 1,425 cars. He did this in part by sending a card to his customers every month on the customer's birthday, on the anniversary of the car purchase, at Christmas time, Happy New Year, Happy Valentine's Day, Happy St. Patrick's Day, etc. At the end of his car selling years, he eventually was sending out 14,000 cards per month. That's 168,000 cards per year. He was spending more on postage in a year than the average car salesperson would earn in commissions. In one of his 5 books, I also remember him explaining another prospecting method. He would go to Detroit Tigers baseball games. He would sit on the railing on the second level. Every time the Tigers hit a home run, he would throw a huge pile of business cards into the air that would float throughout the second level and over a larger area of the first level. The next technique I call Brain Extra. Michel Nere is a professional speaker and a core messaging consultant. I met Michel quite a number of years ago. He told me he used the following technique when working for an advertising agency. He sent in a mannequin's arm to a prospect with a note saying, "Freehand, brain extra." Michel says every time he used this tactic, he got an appointment. I learned of the next technique from a saleswoman called Joyce Baldridge. This technique could be used when trying to close a big sale or a lengthy contract. Send the prospect a large cake with the following writing on it. Some decisions are hard to make. This one's a piece of cake. Sincerely, and then your company's name. I do not remember where I learned the next 2 techniques on how to open the door with a new prospect. First, send the prospect a shoe in a shoebox. Include a note saying something, "Now that I have a foot in the door, let's get together to discuss how and why we feel our products and services are considered the best in the industry." This next prospecting technique is a 2-step approach. In a voicemail or a letter, tell your customer that they are the winners of a brand new Ferrari and that it will arrive soon. Then follow up and courier in a toy car. Enclose a note that says, "Sorry, I could not get you a real car, But I would still like to meet you and tell you why you will be surprised with our dedication to the highest level of customer service. Over the decades, I've literally made tens of thousands of phone calls. Lately, it seems more and more people are hiding behind voicemail. This has made life challenging for salespeople. To the best of my knowledge, I've never heard the following technique taught. Make your voicemail messages entertaining and memorable. After leaving a voice message, always leave a different thought for the day. Here are some of the thoughts that I have used. Thought for the day. There are three kinds of people in the world, those that can count and those that can't count. Thought for the day. 129% of people exaggerate. Thought for the day. 43% of statistics are made up. Thought for the day. Borrow money from a pessimist. They don't expect to get it back. Thought for today. All generalizations are false. Thought for today. What happens if you get scared half to death twice? Thought for today. Tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way they look forward to the trip. Thought for today. I'm not opinionated. I'm just always right. Have fun with it, but don't ever leave any boring messages again. I literally have had prospects tell me they met with me because of my silly thoughts for the day. True professional salespeople should change their personal voicemail greeting daily, detailing their availability for the day. I personally add a short thought for today in my greeting. Again, be unique, have fun with it. Be sure to pick up a great book called The Funniest Quotes Book, 1001 of the best humorous quotations. Before I deal with the most important sales idea of all times, developing trust, I want to again stress the importance of continually studying sales training material. Through your local library, you will find countless books and audiobooks available. Go to YouTube and type in sales training and you will find thousands of videos. I also found the following 3 Dale Carnegie programs to be extremely helpful. The Effective Communication and Human Relation Program, the Sales Course Program, and the High Impact Presentation Program. The Canadian Professional Sales Association also has lots of training courses. The #1 best book ever is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay, what is the one true secret to building trust? Any ideas? A number of years ago, I went into a restaurant. I was all by myself, so I went in and sat at the bar. I was the only person at the bar. Eventually, the bartender came and took my food and drink order. She tried to act as nice as can be. Meanwhile, I was thinking in the back of my mind, faker! You see, the bartender had ignored me for 9 or 10 minutes. Sure, she was busy getting drinks for all the waiters and waitresses at the other end of the bar. She was, however, at one point standing immediately in front of me doing some work. In fact, she could have reached over and just touched me. Did she acknowledge me and say she would be with me as soon as she can? No. Next time you eat out, ask yourself the question, does this waiter or waitress genuinely like people? Or are they just pretending to? At times you will find waitstaff that should not be serving tables. You can tell that they are negative and or they don't even like people. Even though most waitstaff will try to show you that they like you, you are able to see right through them. Here is the key question. Do you unconditionally love all people? Imagine for a minute you're traveling on the highway and someone dashes up on the entrance ramp and cuts you off. Do you automatically presume in your mind that the driver must have a passenger who's having a heart attack? Can you reframe every situation? Are you always automatically forgiving of everybody? I remember a story from 20 years ago. Imagine for a minute you are Graham or Lou Ann Schneider. Dan Schneider, your son, an NHL hockey player, was riding in fellow teammate Danny Heatley's Ferrari. Danny Heatley was traveling at a very high rate of speed and violently crashed. In fact, the car hit an iron fence and the car split in half. Your son sustained severe brain injuries and a week later dies. What would your feelings be towards Danny Heatley? Graham Schneider has said, forgiveness is also a part of being human. There's nothing to be gained from harboring resentment or anger towards others. We are all human beings, and we know human beings make mistakes. Danny Heatley was charged with vehicle homicide and reckless driving. Because of the Schneider's family's insistence, Danny Heatley was allowed to plead guilty to 4 lesser charges. Graham Schneider declined to seek retribution. When he read the victim impact statement, he asked Danny Heatley not to be sent to jail. Respecting the family's wishes, the judge sentenced Danny Heatley to 3 years probation. Part of his order was for Heatley to make public speeches about the dangers of speeding. The judge was so moved about the Schneider's family's insistence, he wondered if he could do the same if the situation was reversed. I maintain the ability to forgive is at the heart of loving all people, and loving all people is at the heart of building trust. People buy from people. If you love all people unconditionally, you will naturally always be honest and sell with integrity. I personally believe only a genuine, honest person can be truly caring. There are thousands of sales ideas. The 2 most important ideas are rapport and developing trust. There is no question that trust is the most important facet of sales. As I close, here is the one true secret of building trust. Be totally forgiving of others and love all people unconditionally. I challenge you to become fearless, courageous, and develop a radical imagination. I've covered many unique sales techniques. What you need to do is translate these ideas into your situations. Don't be afraid to be different in a good way. I would love to hear from you. Please share with me any unique sales techniques that worked for you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve you today. Thank you for listening to this sales keynote. I will call soon to discuss when you would like me to present the sales keynote to your sales team. Make it an awesome day. Christopher the Bullet.